1. I've always been interested in the paranormal. I haven't played with any Ouija boards or anything like that, because I know the dangers of messing with stuff like that. The strange occurrences started only a couple months ago when I would suddenly see someone out of the corner of my eye. It was something that actually made me turn my head to see who had entered the room. But as you can guess, there was never anyone there. The first time it happened, I was watching TV in the living room by myself. The hallway is just to the left of the couch I was on, and anyone sitting there could easily tell if someone was in the hallway. You know how you know what something looks like out of the corner of your eye? Like if anything was placed in that spot? You could tell even though you weren't looking directly at it. That's how it was for me. I was watching whatever was on at the time, and suddenly I could see something in the hallway that looked about as tall as my dad. I glanced over to see if it was, and there was nobody there. I didn't think much of it because it could just have been my imagination, so I just turned my head back to the TV. Strangely enough, as soon as I did that, the figure appeared again. It was so distinct it made me turn my head again to see if anyone was there, but like last time, there was no one. This happened enough times to where I just ended up putting my hand up to shield my vision from that part of the hallway. I was pretty freaked out, but it didn't seem like anything to worry about. Up until this day, the shadows had been still and immobile, aside from the spontaneous appearances and disappearances. This time, though, instead of a person, it was a cat. I own an outside cat, and she isn't allowed in except when it's feeding time, and even then she was only allowed in the kitchen. This happened in the middle of the afternoon, so she was outside sleeping on a chair. I was talking to my mom in the hallway when I noticed a small cat-like figure in my peripheral vision. I wouldn't have noticed it except for the fact that it trotted cautiously around the corner of the living room, much like my cat would do when she knows she's in trouble for coming too far into the house. This action made me do a double take to see if my cat had actually gotten in somehow. I whipped my head around to see where the figure went, but obviously I didn't see anything. My mom must not have noticed because she didn't have any reaction. This last one just happened to me yesterday afternoon while I was playing solitaire on the computer. My door was shut, and I was laying on my bed, facing the door. The back of my door has a mirror on it, and if you stand directly in front of it, there is a wall immediately on the left. For some reason, I felt the urge to look up at that corner of my room. At this time, I was looking into my mirror and I saw a shadow person pass directly in front of it, and the mirror vibrated a little bit. The figure did not pass in front of it as if they were in my room, but they were inside the mirror. The way it came, it would have had to pass through the wall on the left and then walk into my bookshelf, but it was just inside the mirror. I know that people say that mirrors are sometimes portals to the other side, but I hope that's not true. I was talking to someone about the cat figure experience when I went to look outside to see if my cat was in her usual spot. When I looked out the window, I saw her sitting upright like cats normally do, but she was looking directly into my eyes. She didn't turn her head to look at me, but already had her head turned toward the window, and it just happened to be directly where my eyes were. It was probably just a coincidence, but it still freaked me out. 2. Background of my house. So I'll start out by saying that I am a 25-year-old who moved back into my childhood house with my fiancé and 18-month-old son. One of my 2 brothers and my mom live with us as well. My parents built the house before my mom was even pregnant with me, and all we know is that it was farmland before. We live in a small town in the suburbs of Minnesota where literally nothing happens. There have been 2 homicides in 200 years, and they were the same group of people fighting over the same thing. I have always been fascinated with the paranormal, because I have always been able to sense things. It's hard to explain. You know how you can feel when someone is mad at you? It's like that, but I can pick up on all different emotions. When I was little, my dad got really sick and needed surgery that left him disabled. I was about 2. My mom got a job as a nurse and worked a lot of nights, leaving my oldest brother to help care for his younger 2 siblings. I would see shadows out of the corner of my eye all the time. I remember refusing to ever sleep with my mirror facing my bed. I still won't. But to this day I could not tell you why. I often wonder if I experienced something as a really little child and blocked it out. When my childhood cat died, I would see it walking down the hall into my brother's room. Our house has 4 floors to it, the lowest being a basement below ground for storage, your typical, covered in cobwebs, etc. I was never afraid of it. I actually loved it because I would paint down there. One day I went down to the basement and every single hair in my body stood straight up. It literally felt like the air was electrified. This was as intense as it got as a child. I spent a lot of time outside at the neighbors' houses or with my nose in a book after that. A few years passed and I honestly forgot about most of it, and brushed the rest off as just me being a kid with an overactive imagination. But then one day as a teenager that all changed. At this point in my life I was an angry 13-year-old obsessed with everything black and angry at the world. My parents were in the middle of a nasty divorce. One of my friends introduced me to a Ouija board as a harmless game. I spent a lot of time by myself as a teenager. I started playing with it a lot by myself. I thought it was the coolest thing, although no one ever believed me when I told them some of the things the board would spell out. One day I was home alone, sitting on the end of my bed, and I glanced up. What I saw peeking around the doorway is hard to describe. It was like the blackest black outline of a person, colored in black. No eyes, no face, no defining features. I remember just absolutely freezing when I made eye contact with it. It didn't have eyes, but I could feel it looking at me for what felt like a lifetime, but wasn't more than 5 seconds. It darted out of the doorway, out of my view. I guess a sane person would have been scared or screamed or something, but I just got up, quickly ran out of the doorway where I thought it would have been, but there was nothing. I will note that I had 5 cats and a dog that would have let me know if someone was in the house or had gotten home. I searched the house, except for the basement. Nothing. Then I started getting woken up at night. It would be right around 3 a.m. It didn't happen every night. It's important to note that my dad and brother moved out, and the only male in the house was my brother who worked overnights 5 nights a week. I would get woken up to my full name being spoken in my ear in a male voice, way deeper than my brother's or my dad's. My brothers weren't that old yet, and my dad actually got a really bad illness as a kid that ruined his vocal cords, and made his voice kind of squeaky and high-pitched, so I knew it wasn't either of them. This was a voice that, to this day, I have never heard anywhere else. I normally would have just written this off as not being a big deal, but when I told my mom why I wasn't ever sleeping well, she froze, and got this really scared look on her face and said it was happening to her too. After that, my cats would hiss at nothing. I would try to avoid being home as much as possible. I burned the Ouija board and used sage to try and cleanse the house. I moved into my first apartment a couple years later and will never forget my first night there. My cat started hissing and yowling like I've never heard her, and to this day, she's 12, never has again, clearly staring at something I couldn't see. Then she started running from room to room as if chasing something. My dad passed away a year or 2 before I moved out. Well after I saw the shadow figure in the doorway, and left behind his cats. One of the cats he left behind is the one who did this. So has anyone ever experienced anything similar to this? I'm mainly interested in whether or not anyone who has also had their name whispered in their ear, like their first and last name, in the middle of the night. 3. Hello. I just want to preface this by saying that I fully believe in ghosts. I just do not believe that I am, in my own terms, special enough to have experience with them. I am not sensitive to the paranormal and therefore have not experienced much. But I do have some creepy stories to share, most of them from my dad's house. But the one I'll be sharing today is from a dorm room I was staying in last year. I lived with my best friend in a dorm last year. I want to say that I've seen other dorm rooms from other universities, and I can safely say the dorms at my university are very small, just a single rectangular room. But for my dorm standards, I had a very large dorm room, more like a large square. Sorry for the babbling. Anyway, throughout the academic year, we had experienced very small, brush-it-off paranormal experiences. Things such as sounds in the middle of the night, and because my friend is sensitive, feelings of entities in our room. Specifically, one corner of our room is where sounds would happen, and where she would feel a presence, where my desk and her closet were located. During the night, it seemed that the corner was just a bit darker than the rest of the room. Overall, it felt as if something was there, but it did not seem harmful. One night, my ex was staying in my room. I had agreed to drive him to work the next morning, and the easiest way was to have him stay over. I have to mention that every bed in every dorm here is a twin bed, and you can guess how uncomfortable it is to sleep on a twin with two people. My ex was a bed hog, and would constantly move in his sleep, preventing me from sleeping. I had class the next morning after I dropped him off at work, so I desperately needed sleep. I tried to wake him up to make him move over, but he wasn't budging. Eventually, I got angry enough to sleep on the floor, so I angrily bring a pillow and blanket to the floor and try to fall asleep. I am right next to the void that is under my bed. I had brought my bed up so I could fit my dresser under it. It was a very large space. As I am trying to fall asleep while trying to get comfortable on the very hard floor, I heard something laugh at me. It wasn't playful, but also wasn't evil either, like someone was mocking me for sleeping on the floor. I freeze and look under the bed and in the dark corner previously mentioned. I couldn't tell where it specifically came from, but I did know it came from somewhere in that area. I freeze, trying to rationalize the noise. While I am laying there frozen, my friend wakes up and looks at me. I thought she was still asleep until she asks if it was me on the floor. Immediately after this, I fall asleep. I do not know why or how, because I was not as tired as I should have been, but alas, I was knocked out until morning. That following morning, I tell both my friend and my ex what had happened. My ex kind of giggles at me, and my friend asks if I think it was one of them. I knew it wasn't. The voice I had heard was deep and loud. My friend is female, and my ex has a decently high-toned and quiet voice. It couldn't have been either of them. I still think about that and whether I did imagine it. It felt so real that I about pissed myself when it happened. Anyway, I try not to think about it in a negative way. Although it did feel like whatever and whoever was in the room was making fun of me for being so angry. 4. Hello, I thought I'd share the strange experience I had while working at a hotel in Sweden. The hotel is stunning. Located in the mountains with an amazing view over one of Sweden's larger lakes and forests. The hotel itself has a main building and some smaller freestanding cabins, dotted around as well as a little bakery. It's designed to look old-fashioned and traditional, and has been standing there for many decades. It's truly an amazing place, and we get lots of guests visiting us. It all started when I offered to help the team in the reception. I had mostly been sorting out breakfast, lunch, and helped run the little bakery, where we baked and sold traditional Swedish pastries, bread, and coffee. After months of me begging and nagging, my boss finally caved in and scheduled me to help in the reception. The hotel is quite small, so the whole team were very close, and we helped out wherever we could to run the hotel. I wanted to gain experience as a receptionist for the future, so this was perfect. I was thrilled. My first shift was in the evening, which meant I was going to help with the close. The reception was unmanned during the night and was reopened early in the morning. I had one of the full-time receptionists, let's call her Anne, guide me through everything. We checked in, said goodbye to the guests checking out, and general admin stuff. Suddenly it was 11 p.m. and it was time for the reception to close. We tidied up, finished the last of the paperwork, and Anne showed me how to disconnect the main phone so any calls would be directed to a voicemail giving information about opening times. We were about to leave when suddenly the phone started to ring. I looked at Anne and said, "I thought no calls could get through after we disconnected the phone." She recalled with, "They can't, however." and proceeded to guide me back behind the reception desk and up to the phone. The phone was able to show which room was calling, and it displayed 103. She asked me to pick it up, and, well, I did. I moved the phone to my ear and said, "Good evening, reception speaking, how can I—" I had been confident a guest would be on the other end, and maybe we just didn't disconnect the phone properly. I was interrupted by a loud static, and then the phone hung up. Creeped out, I looked at Anne, who explained to me that room 103 has a tendency to call every now and again, usually during the later hours. Same thing every time. Either you hear loud static or complete silence until it hangs up. She then proceeded to tell me, "The only weird thing is, there's no phone in room 103. Later on, I learned that room 103 had gotten so many complaints from our guests in the past. Every time a guest would be booked in room 103, they would refuse to stay in it and demand a new room. Most common reason given would be unease, which the customer never really wanted to elaborate on. And since the guest is always right, all the receptionist could do was book them into a new room." In the end, the reception simply stopped booking guests into the room and now stands empty. 5. I'm writing this now because I've been thinking more about what happened in this beautiful blue house. In a dead-end little town called Townsend, located 40 miles out from Helena, Montana. I remember the night that my family and I had all arrived. My father was driving the moving truck with my brother and sister. I rode in with my mother as we had a rabbit, 2 cats, and my dog, Kinji. Since I wasn't able to say anything to my siblings right away when the house came into view, I had no one except my mother to tell her about how I didn't like how the house felt. She wanted to know what I meant by that, and I told her that I feel like we, the whole family, don't belong to the house. That we're intruding and unwelcomed. My mother thinks I'm just making things up since it was a really long drive and trip, moving to this small town from Redding, California. The animals, at this time, were rather calm and didn't even seem to be bothered by the house. So I thought that I might have been overreacting about having to move in the very tail end of the school year. My siblings and I have spent spring break actually packing up everything to move out. I never got to say goodbye to the very few people I got close to. Yeah, I was mad about this sudden move and argued with my dad to just wait a couple more months, when all 3 of us were in summer break instead. He instead stated I'm being unreasonable and that spring break is the perfect time to move. Good guess that I didn't like my father very much, if ever, from that point going forward. We had the entire upper floor for ourselves. A small add-on apartment with a kitchen, bedroom, bathroom, and living room. A door with a round knob for the deadbolt separated the living room from the hallway. A 2-bedded bedroom with 2 closets and a bench was across the hallway from the upstairs apartment. Between the 2 is a bathroom with shower and tub. This is important. There were stairs that would go down to the ground floor next to the bedroom, and my room at the other end of the hallway. The other wall had a door that led up to the attic, separating the living space and my room along that wall. This is also important. My room has a queen-sized futon laid out on the floor, and I put my box of clothes and blankets down. It was really late, and dinner was calling to me. So far everything seems to be going great, and I'm soon forgetting my first reaction about the place, as I get myself ready for bed and to pass out for the night. I took my dog into my room, getting her used to sleeping in the same room with me. My room was actually pretty big. 2 windows, where one faced out to the front yard, and one faced the neighbor's house. Next to each room was a closet with a door. The futon was set up under the window facing the front yard, and next to what I would soon call the demonic closet. I really didn't feel comfortable having my back to this particular closet, and would sleep with my face facing the closed door. I don't remember passing out, or when my dog would have moved. But I heard her growling. Kinji only growled this aggressively when there was an intruder. I'm thinking she's reacting to our neighbor downstairs, and didn't know that he is here in this house too. That there's another person living in this home minus the 5 of us. I moved to shush her, even trying to scold her to shush, but she refused. Kinji never disobeyed an order from me before. I've had her for almost 2 years now, and she has never disobeyed me. I decide to roll over and try to calm her down. I stopped. Standing in front of the closed closet door next to the window is a woman. She's white, as in her whole figure was white, wearing a Victorian-style dress and just looking back and forth to Kinji and myself. I'm not feeling cold, just scared because I know what I'm looking at cannot be alive. Kinji growling again, snapping me out of my fear to pat her. I can feel her short fur bristling on her back, and knew that she was in full kill mode. I blinked a few times to try and wake myself up more, and the more times I blinked, the white woman would fade more and more away. When she was completely gone, Kinji would move closer to my face, making sure I'm okay, and I just reward her with a lot of petting. I'm going to have to do some hunting in the morning. The next day, we're unloading the rest of the U-Haul truck so it could go back. It was about midday when I met the neighbors' kids, the ones who live in the house my second window faces. They were happy to meet Kinji, who is super happy to meet more kids as she loves children. It's not long before they ask to meet my grandmother, which I'm confused by this question. The little one had said they saw her through their own window and my window, looking at them. When he went to get his siblings, she was already gone. Now I knew I wasn't seeing things from being tiredly awakened by my dog, and that someone else had saw what I saw. It also reminded me of my late-night proclamation about doing some research on the woman. I head upstairs to my room with Kinji following after me, and check on the closet door that the ghost woman stood in front of before. I open the door and see some items in the closet that belongs to the owner, who lives downstairs. Some of these items include an old newspaper printed in the 1910s, featuring the very same woman that I saw the night before. She was a winner in some bicycle event, though now I can't remember when that event actually took place. I was stunned by this, and now I have a name to the face I saw the night before. And while it would be the last time I see this woman, it would be the beginning of everything else in this house to turn against my family. A few weeks go by, and I don't think much about the ghost woman I met my first night. Kinji was outside in the backyard while I was in my sister's and brother's room, talking with a school friend I've met. I suddenly hear my dog crying out in absolute pain, and rushed down the stairs to get my dog. My friend is following me, terrified of what could have happened with my dog. Apparently she managed to get her paw stuck between the spokes of the white picket fence that surrounds the back half of the property. I'm holding my dog up, so she's no longer hanging off the fence, while my friend went to get some help for my dog. My father was home and ran down the stairs when he heard that there was trouble. With his help, we freed my dog's paw, and I refused to let her out of my sight after that had happened. My father also believes that my dog heard both my friend and I talking with each other, and Kinji was jumping over the fence to try and get closer to me, or to find me. Remember the first closet, next to the window facing out to the front yard? I decided to start looking into this closet a month later. I always refused to sleep with the door to my back. It's broad daylight, and didn't think that anything bad could happen with me exploring this closet. There's another window in this closet that also faces the front yard. Something else in this closet was an old cloth mannequin head and arm. Both were up on the closet shelf, but both felt like they didn't really belong there. A few nights later, I'm hearing a knocking at the closet door. This got my dog barking in my room as well as waking me up. I first thought someone, like my sister, was knocking at my bedroom door. I called out to go back to bed, shushed my dog gently. Then the knocking came again. I look to this closet door, moving away from it with my dog backing up with me. She's in full-on killer mode again, and we backed to the second window. Watch the closet door open. The light inside flicker, and the head and arm float within the closet for a whole minute, before both items dropped to the ground with a loud thud. I'm absolutely confused by this, as the light in that closet wasn't working before. It's supposed to be a pull string to turn it on or off, and the string was completely missing. I held on to Kinji while watching the light fade off and the door close. I decided to sleep where I managed to scoot to instead, refusing to go near this closet for anything but the one blanket and my dog. I didn't even dare to think to go for my pillow. My sister had confided in me a couple of things that happened to her in this house years later. She was scared of her room, even though the beds and the closets were both new. Her closet door would open with a guy hanging himself. She'd hide in the same bed as my brother whenever this happened. She also saw items moving a little bit, and at first thought she was psychic. I had to comfort her into lying about how it might have been a ghost instead, telling her that it was the wind. The bathroom in the hallway has no window, and a small vent that gave a very light airflow. I don't know how the toilet paper ball moved in the bathroom myself. She also told me the first night she saw the house, her thoughts were the same as mine that night. That we were intruders and not welcome to live there. The final straw that made me collapse and tell my father that he was wrong about this house. He's arguing with me about chores, only because I'm tired of being my mother 2.0 for him to verbally abuse, and he's screaming at me. My dog is barking at the door that separates the living room and the hallway. I've heard this barking enough to know now what she is warning about. While in rage, my father screams at me to shut that fucking nut. I retaliated back by yelling at him, she's barking at a ghost. He tells me that there's no such thing as ghosts, and I watched that door slam shut, locking the door with a round knob deadbolt. The slam shook the entire apartment and possibly the whole floor. My dad scoffs and blames it on the wind. There are 3 large windows in the living room, and all face out to the neighbor's house, but none of them was open. I also don't think that this wind could lock the deadbolt. 2 weeks after this, my father decided that we should all move to a much less haunted house, over 100 miles away from Townsend. We also moved in the summertime, as he believes me now when moving is in the summer. Found out 3 years later, part of the ceiling for that place collapsed with my sister under it. The whole building was condemned and both my father and sister had to relocate somewhere else in that city. Hey everybody, Hellfreezer here, and thank you very much for listening to 5 True Paranormal Stories, episode 137. And thank you very much to everybody who allowed me to use their stories in this video. Well, it is currently almost 20 past 4 in the PM, which is rare for me recording, but I've been getting up rather early recently. Sleeping okay, but getting up early. And, oh, well, that's me done recording. And I keep getting interrupted today. And, as I've been keeping you guys updated, the things for my fish tank are arriving, most of which are arriving today. So I keep getting interrupted. Got interrupted by a driver who couldn't find my house. The first thing he said was he couldn't get in the gate. I said, well, why don't you just open it? Just open it, it's right there. So I went downstairs, and just as he hung up, I opened the door, and of course there's no one at my gate. Then he phones up again, and when he phones up again the second time, I finally twig, hang on, I know exactly where he is. He made the mistake that some people occasionally, not that often these days, I don't think I've ever had this from an Amazon driver before, made the mistake of assuming that my house was a flat. It's not. It's a house. That's why I call it a house. But because of the way they're numbered, kind of weird numbering. And he'd been trying to get into the flats, which are above the local shop. So I had to tell him, and no, where are you? Okay, right, all right, I know where you are. Right, tell you what, I will stand outside. It's drizzling of rain. I'm not well, but I'll stand outside so you can find this house. He eventually does get to the house just as I'm opening the gate. He found it the second time. And he's got the cheek. I almost cursed there, but no, I will not curse. He's got the cheek to be stroppy with me as he hands the parcel. Look at this for you. Okay. You may have had a bad up day, you don't take it out on your customers, especially when you've just screwed one of them around while he's trying to get things done. Anyway, one must be patient. And the rest of the stuff, and the other parcel with the most of the other stuff in it, that arrived fine. That guy found the door no bother. He's like, yeah, some of them are hard to find, but this one was no problem at all. Friendly fella. Then I'd phoned my sister up earlier to ask if she'd pick something up for me at the post office, which she is willing to do if I need her to. And but I might wait till the weekend to see if I can get it myself, actually. And we'd had a conversation, but she was picking kids up from school, and I was, oh, okay, right. So we had a quick conversation, and I thought the conversation was over and we'd hung up. But she thinks she was rude to me. She wasn't, but she thinks she was. So she actually knocks on my door on the way home to apologise and see what it was I was trying to say. Well, nothing. But well, anyway, I'm going to head off for now. So until next time, thank you very much for listening, and take very good care of yourselves.